I was going to do a quick intro and then give each of our speakers a little bit more time to go in depth so you understand why they're here and what area of cyber that they cover. So today we have Wendy Chervony. She's a SOC analyst for Secular Solutions. So that is a defensive role. Angela has a unique background, and I'm thrilled for you all to hear a little bit about more of her story. She works in cybersecurity awareness and training for Duke Health. Jose Barrientos is an awesome speaker, and I can't wait for you all to get just a glimpse of his fantastic personality and his backstory. He works as a red team operator at Zoom, so he does penetration testing, which considers offensive security. And then we have Mansi, who is referred to as the doctor of digital hygiene, and we are thrilled to have her today as well. So when she doesn't discuss InfoSec, she has an awesome background as well and has actually played a lead role in the PBS documentary Life Hackers. So I will go ahead and let each of you introduce yourselves, and I'm thrilled to have each of you here. I will go ahead and we'll start with Mansi, if that.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be on this panel, right? So a little bit about me, though my 9 to 5 have mostly been in corporations, right? I try to devote the rest of the time to giving back to the community as much as I can, bringing diversity and technical skills into the field. For that, I'm associated with Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu. And then during the summers, I help out at DEF CON in their NOC team. So, yeah.
Great. Jose, would you go ahead and give us a little intro to you?
Sure. Well, I'm a red team operator, as was mentioned earlier. I'm passionate about all aspects of cybersecurity, but my main focus is doing threat simulation, particularly in Windows or Mac environments.
Great. Wendy, go ahead.
Hi, so I work as a SOC 2 analyst for Secular Solutions. I focus on network defense, primarily protecting our nation's 911 systems in the United States and other critical infrastructure networks.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Angela, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angie, and I currently work for Duke Health. I am an information security analyst, but I work in the cybersecurity awareness and training program. So a big portion of what I do is send out a lot of phishing emails and trying to train our staff on how to spot them and how to avoid them.
The front lines of defense for all of you in your own unique ways. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you came into your current role, if you don't mind sharing, and what you like about your particular field. Angie, we'll start with you.
Okay, so how did I come into this role? I'm definitely a career changer. I used to be in forensics. I used to be a crime scene investigator, and awesome work, very rewarding, but it can be very draining. Also, I'm a military spouse, so shout out to all the military spouses out there. So I had to find a job that was more portable than working in forensics. And my husband was like pushing me towards cybersecurity. And at first I'm like, I can't learn this stuff, I'm too old. And then I finally took the plunge and I was accepted into SANS, the SANS ICMCP Diversity Cyber Academy. I'm actually finishing up the tail end now. And I was able to learn so much and get my foot in the door that way. So transitioning in, I was able to get an awesome job that was actually looking for newbies and was willing to train. So that's how I came about making the transition, and definitely through SANS was able to help me learn all that I needed to know in order to get my foot in the door.
Great. And what do you like about your current role the most?
What I like the most is actually coming up with our phishing emails. We have to gain insight from what's actually going on in the wild, right? Taking those emails and trying to apply them in a way that works for our organization. With our organization, we have some goals though. We try not to do anything that could upset normal business practices. We try not to do anything that could be mean. So we try not to send out anything about diet pills, dating, pay raises, things like that. But things that people typically have to experience in their everyday life, like Zoom. We sent out a great Zoom phishing email to say, hey, somebody's waiting for your Zoom, to be entered into your Zoom call. Lots of clicks on that because we're so busy, right? We never slow down to see what's going on. So with our training program, it's great coming up with these emails and trying to get creative, but it's also awesome training, seeing people progress, the different departments get better at spotting those phishing emails and reporting them.
Great, thank you. Wendy, I know that you have recently started that position as a SOC analyst. Tell us a little bit about what you like about that position and how you came to work as a SOC analyst.
Well, so I was not working in cybersecurity. I went through the Cyber Workforce Academy, Maryland with SANS, and I got cybersecurity training there. And I was really just trying to get my foot in the door in cybersecurity. And I started working, I got my job at Secular Solutions. I started as a SOC 1 analyst, and I moved up to be a SOC 2 analyst. And it was really great to get some hands-on experience doing cybersecurity. I really love that I'm doing meaningful work. I'm working with 911 and critical infrastructure centers, and it's really important because especially if a 911 center gets shut down, that could really affect people's lives. It is very serious, and I love that I get to be a part of it.
Thanks, Wendy. And I love that I think everyone's a little bit more aware after the Colonial Pipeline attack. So I think it's great that you are all here and that we can talk about something that is very much in the news and people are much more aware of. So Jose, tell us a little bit about how you came to cyber. I know that you've had an interesting background and what you love about pen testing.
Sure. Well, so I was a career dev before I got into information security. So I used to write, desktop applications, web applications, and that was fine. But I didn't really find that as fulfilling as I thought I would. So once I started transitioning to InfoSec, I found that that was kind of my world. I really like to take things apart. I love seeing how they work. I like making them do things they're not supposed to do. So I prefer being on the offensive side. I did do a little SOC work briefly, but I like being on my side of the hustle for sure. So specifically the threat emulation, because it's one thing to sort of come up with a scenario and try to figure out like, all right, what are our vulnerabilities on this threat vector, right? Like how many ways can somebody get in? But I like to actually execute it and do it and sort of create an attack chain and highlight what I think is like low-hanging fruit versus like what are the bigger, more complex issues in the network. What I like about my job the most is that you're basically doing it for real. So you are creating a phishing campaign to, and you have to make a payload that's not going to alert, EDR or send off any flags. So it's like I basically get to be a professional criminal without having to, get in trouble for it. So I think I like that the best.
I'm glad you're one of the good guys. I'll say that. Mansi, tell us a little bit about what you love and how you came to be in cyber. I know you have a great background.
Yeah, so I sense a common pattern here where none of us actually came like starting with, okay, I'm going to be in cybersecurity from like day one. So that's cool. I remember finishing up my undergrad in life sciences and I was all set with my doctorate applications for nanotechnology when I got a call from my mom saying she couldn't get into her email, right? So I was like, I brushed it off. I was like, did you check the caps lock? Like, are you sure? Do you remember your password? But turns out it was a case of unauthorized access, right? So that experience was my first exposure to the fields of cybersecurity and one that impacted me greatly because it touched so close to home. Like that's my mom. I immediately changed my career into cybersecurity and activated the defender in me. Before joining or while I was in grad school and learning and all that, what excited me was that you get to be like a digital superhero, right? You get to have your cape without anyone really knowing that it's your cape, but you get to have that power. As I learned more and I realized, okay, now there are different types of capes that as you can, from the other panels, you can tell. What I love about my job is that cybersecurity is so much of like a red hot button, right? Everything is like, oh no, this is urgent, this is urgent, this is urgent. So in GRC, you get to like take a step back and be like, okay, what are the biggest risks? And how do you get the biggest like bang for your buck kind of thing? One example would be like a vulnerability, right? Is not the same across, if it's like a global platform, it wouldn't be having the same kind of impact just because different softwares would use different versions of it, or however you want to say it. So how do you prioritize anything? Oh no, North America, let's focus on it, but Asia, not right now, we can prioritize something else. So I love taking that step back and getting that eagle eye view. That's my favorite part of my role right now.
Wonderful. I see a lot of nodding heads. So it seems like the superheroes without capes is a common theme with this group, which we very much appreciate. So you all have mentioned certain technical aspects that you work with, but it seems that there is a common thread that there is also certain aspects or characteristics that you all have and soft skills that have made you become really successful in your fields or have helped you along the way. So can you speak to some of the soft skills that you use in your particular field? Mansi, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think communication is huge. Whether you're talking to the users, as Angela was talking, right, or whether it's the executives or the vulnerable, like the actual developers that the IT folks are like, no, we just need to get this done. Like you know, everyone is so fast paced that how do you communicate to your counterparts, to the folks who are a little bit more resistant to changing and taking that second step? That's like the biggest part for sure for me.
I see a lot of head nodding. Angela, you seemed really, really enthusiastic about that. Angie, so why don't you share a little bit about it? That seems to be a common thread? Is that a skill that you think is really important? And are there others that you would add to that?
Yes, so communication is huge and playing well with others. So what we recently had happen, we had a phishing campaign where we had to send out emails to 7,000 users. Okay, well, mistake on our part, we did not stagger those emails. Nor did we communicate effectively with the service desk because they were overwhelmed. I mean, so were we, because we're getting all these emails like, is this phishing? Is this phishing? And I mean, I answered 100 emails in a span of about an hour. So they just like kept coming and coming and coming. And so that taught us like, okay, we don't work in a bubble, right? Our actions are definitely going to affect someone else in other departments. So we need to sit down, have a powwow about it and figure out how we can both operate at the same time and achieve the same goal, right? The service desk is always going to get calls. There's always going to be some fire that they're going to have to extinguish, and we are going to have to train people, but we don't want to overwhelm them if we don't have to. So let's come together, figure out a better plan for how we're going to execute this the next time. And I mean, this was recent, like we just had the meeting yesterday about it. So when she was saying, Mansi was saying communication, I'm like, yes, girl, yes, all of that.
Wonderful. It sounds like some understanding of how the business operates is really important as well. Jose, would you agree with that? Is that an important aspect of your particular?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's really interesting because when I tell people about my work, they seem to think that it requires this like sort of like you have to be a genius and you have to know everything about everything. And first of all, no one knows everything, right? There's a lot of collaboration. And further, I think it's more of creative thinking, right? So at the end of the day, yeah, what I do is very technical, but the means with which I carry it out has to be creative and unique. I'll give you an example. I'm not the best programmer in the world. My previous career teammates would tell you that. And I used to really sort of have this imposter syndrome about that. It's like, well, I'm not programming and my code doesn't look really pretty and it's not the most efficient. Well, I write payloads now. And because my source code doesn't look like normal source code, my payloads flag way less than most of my teammates. It's because it's scattered, right? That uniqueness, that sort of originality now is a benefit, right? And so if your job is to put a key inside a lock or to do a task the way that it was designed to be done, A, B, and then C, that's not very helpful to our industry, because in our industry, sometimes you start with C. And so it's that out of the box creative thinking that I think is even more important than knowing everything there is to know about a particular application or how a computer works. So I would say that's probably the most important soft skill, is the ability to step back and say, okay, I see how this works. That's wonderful. How can I take this and make it do something else? So that I think is really important and very beneficial to me.
Great, thank you. And Wendy, what type of skills do you think have been really helpful? I know you're in the earlier stages of your career, but are there specific soft skills that you have, maybe that analytical thinking that you just came out with, or that creative thinking like Jose mentioned, that have been really helpful for you as an analyst? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, absolutely. There are definitely some skills that are helpful. As you mentioned, analytical skills are very helpful because a lot of the work I'm doing is kind of like detective work. You have to you're looking at network traffic, you're trying to see what's going on, you're trying to see if there's anything out of the ordinary. You're doing digging and investigating to try to see exactly what's going on and get a bigger picture so you can see if there are any problems. So analytical skills are very helpful. Also, communication definitely, and also a little bit of customer service because I'm talking to sometimes system administrators. Um, they are very overworked. They're very busy. You need to try to explain security issues to them in a way that they will want to work with you and correct these issues. It's really important, and it's not that they are not interested, but you really need to be able to have a good relationship with them, explain issues clearly, and be able to work together well to be successful in securing networks.
I love that aspect of that relationship management that seems to be really integral to all of your roles, is understanding everyone's part and how they play it, but also how to work really well. Collaboration seems to be a consistent theme across every area of cyber. I also wanted to touch on something that Jose mentioned, which is imposter syndrome. For those that may be listening in that have not heard of it, imposter syndrome is the idea that everyone knows that you're faking or that you're not really good enough for the role that you're in. And it is common across every industry. It does not discriminate based on gender or any other lines. I think almost everyone that has worked in cyber has felt some form of it. And so I'd love if each of you could share a little bit about how you tackle this, if you have dealt with it. I don't want to assume that you have, and maybe some tips for individuals who are breaking into the field where that imposter syndrome seems to be a really, really heavy concern.
Yeah, I can tackle this one first. So from life sciences, I had zero coding, it's like it's IT, cybersecurity. I was just like, oh, what? Like, I'm going to be in my lab. So the first few weeks of grad school were all my classmates, I guess, in a way, they were all like, they've come from 20 plus years of doing this, so they're like, oh yeah, we can now just change perspective into looking this. And I was like, wait, what perspective? I'm like asking about sodium chloride or like lame chemistry jokes. I can do that. But so yes, a huge amount starting off, definitely a huge amount. And I think, but one of the cool aspects of cybersecurity specifically is the community. Like, I can't emphasize this enough, whether it's the different nonprofits that we have, whether it's the different conferences that we have, like everyone is here to learn and everyone shares that passion. And if you dive deep enough into, few groups or something and develop your tribe, like rely on your tribe, that's something that's, I can't say I've fully gotten out of the imposter syndrome. I definitely have my moments where I'm just like, oh, do I have, like, can I even speak on this? But that helps. So realizing that you're not alone, right? I think whether you're coming from a professional perspective and realizing that many companies get affected by something, recently there was this vulnerability that was released for Frag Attack. Jose, you might have heard of it, right? It's affecting like the 802.11 standard. But you back end, you see that the different like companies are working together, be like, oh, you're also affected, I'm also affected. How can we kind of do a coordinated disclosure on it? So yeah, a lot to say, but relying on your tribe and the community definitely helps.
Great. Jose, do you have any thoughts on imposter syndrome? I know you mentioned it originally. So if this is something that you've struggled with, not to put you on the spot, but I also really want to make sure we get a male perspective because I know that that's something that's valuable as well in this space.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I rely mostly on my good looks in most situations, and that has really sort of carried me along. No, yeah, it's it can be crippling, right? It's and as you mentioned before, it's sort of this idea or this notion that you're not good enough or that you don't know enough or that you sort of lucked into this position and your teammates are just leagues and leagues above you. That I have expressed that before with teammates, and everybody feels it, which is really fascinating. I haven't met a single individual that thought, no, I never felt that. Everybody, sort of questions their own qualifications and the efficacy of the value that they bring to the team. I would only say that it does sort of get better with time, because what ends up happening is you get in situations just by the nature of your job where you're out of your depth, you don't really know what to do, and you work through it. You take a second, you Google things, you ask people, and you find that very rarely do people approach a problem with the solution in hand. Rather, there's a problem, people step back, they ask questions, they sort of assess the situation, and little by little, they come up with a solution. And that's everybody's method. And so as you get better at that and collaborate with your team, you realize, oh no, this is something I can do. And this is how everybody does it. And it's okay that you don't know everything. And I have found through the years that it starts to sort of, I mean, I still get it every once in a while, right? And I've been doing this now for what, 3-4 years as my main occupation, but still, nevertheless, it does get better. You just have to work at it, sort of build your own confidence within.
Great, thank you. And mentioning building that confidence, I know that on the technical side of cybersecurity, you all work in different areas and that there are different skill sets and tools that you need to use. So when you're coming in and you're just starting or you're looking to build into your particular area, are there specific tools or recommendations you can make for those that are just starting? I'm going to start with Wendy here. She can recommend anything for those that would be interested in becoming a security analyst. Are there any tools or resources you'd like to recommend?
Well, I think one thing that I still do, that I still like to work with, is hacking challenges, getting a good understanding of vulnerabilities and how vulnerable networks can be, how easy it can be to break into a network. I think that can really help you develop a good skill set and understanding of what vulnerabilities really are. Also, there's a lot of free training courses for Kali Linux, which I think is very helpful. There's a lot of tools that can be used to, also for hacking challenges, or for, you can set up your own home labs to test your own systems and just really practice using as many cybersecurity tools as you can. Capturing network traffic on your own computer can be helpful, and you'll see what's going on and you'll get a better understanding, and you can do it on your own time. You don't have to be an expert. You just keep learning and practicing, I think.
Angie, I know that with you doing phishing emails and setting things up, you have to have a really good understanding, like you mentioned, of what's happening in the wild, for lack of a better term, to use the industry standard there. So do you have any tools or techniques or resources that you like to go to? And if someone's interested in a position like yours, what would be a great place for them to start?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So with phishing emails, what we do is just kind of see, like, we take a deep dive into our own personal emails to see like what we're getting. And we're like, okay, does this apply to my organization? If not, how can I make it apply to my organization? So one task that my boss helped me do, she was like, hey, if we wanted to set up a targeted phish at this department within Duke, how would you do it? And I was like, well, I'll start going to their website and deep diving on their website and seeing what all public information I can start pulling, seeing what type of awards they get, and trying to look for an in that could, that could skirt in, right? So you have to, tools, we don't use too many of them. I mean, we have a tool for our phishing campaign, but just being inquisitive, and I used to be in forensics, so I love to snoop for clues and deep dive, and I'll click on pages and pages and pages and trying to gather information. So open source intelligence, essentially, to start to figure out how we want to get those phish in. And there's a lot of times, I'm not going to lie, we'll think that a certain phish is going to hit and people are going to click on it, and then it doesn't. And then we're like, dang, all that work for nothing. But then we're like, well, no, they're getting good. So for me, I would think, not necessarily a tool, but being inquisitive, trying to figure out how you can tailor stuff, not being afraid to do the legwork, because sometimes it does take work to figure out a targeted phish. I swear, I'll come up with ideas and they'll get shot down. They're like, nah, that's not going to work for us. I'm like, but you're going to fail. It's okay. Just try again. So be resilient. Learn how to dig for information. I think it can work out for you, because honestly, I think security awareness and training, it's a great place to start, because it's not super technical. it's just technical enough, right? And then you start to see the bigger picture as time goes on, and when you start interacting with different departments as well, and seeing how it all pieces together.
I love that. And the idea of that open source intelligence, that's something that people can access. There's a variety of free courses, YouTube, Google Dorking, I think is what it's called. I don't want to say it's the wrong way. Thank you. Yes, nailing these security terms. I'm feeling good about myself, knocking that imposter syndrome down. So Dorking, of course, is using Google especially well, and noticing how to use those search terms. So that's something that people can practice right away if they're interested. That's a great tip, Angela. Thank you. Mansi, do you have any tips for working in your field? And I know that you did do a graduate program as well. So if there's any particular programs or anything like that that you use there, or books, I know that there is no shortage of great reading out there. I know many security professionals have a second nightstand full of the Tower of the books that they're going to work through. So any recommendations?
Yes, no, I like the emphasis on going to work through, right? Are we ever working through completely? Because something else is always in the way. So yes, during grad school, right, I think the importance of setting up a home lab, as that was previously mentioned, huge in terms of just understanding how different systems talk to each other, right? Even whether you're working in a GRC perspective or more on the technical, like a red team, blue team type thing, understanding that, hey, if two computers are connecting and talking to each other, that's the reason why cybersecurity exists, right? If my computer is locked in a briefcase and like pushed up in the attic, why do I need cybersecurity? I don't, because I'm only using, so that's where it comes in. As far as specific tools to get that understanding of risk, right, apart from experience, is to read all these other things that come out, these different publications. So Twitter is definitely my source for like news, but it's great to see when people or companies disclose, you'll see that the same vulnerability, companies disclose it as like, someone will say it's a high vulnerability, will someone say, oh no, it's a medium or low. And then kind of understanding why is that, diving a little bit deeper. And then this, for someone who wants to start off, I would think that the best way would be to write things, how-to articles, or even doing an analysis of like, hey, for the same thing, I saw this difference, and this is why it could be the case. It's such a, I think it's so underrated, because having a blog, doing something on their pastime like that, that's what employers, future mentors, future folks, as you grow up, that's what they, I say grow up, but like as you grow in your career, that's what everyone looks at. And it's a great way to pass on that knowledge. And there's a saying, right, that the best way to learn something is to be able to teach it to someone else. So if you don't have someone that you can be like, hey, I'm going to teach you how like threat analytics works, let me write something on it and then just share it out for others to read. Can I go to?
Great, thank you. I know Jose can speak to that because he had a YouTube tutorial, I believe, that he did on penetration testing a long time ago that went viral. So I think he can speak to that personally. But I also know that penetration testing is a really broad field and something that is probably at the forefront when you think of cybersecurity. You have that stereotype of hacker and hacking with a guy in the hoodie in the back corner, which is clearly based on Jose's good looks, just not the case. So we really would love to hear a little bit about more what you would suggest for those that are considering going down that line of work. And is that something that you start in, do you think, or is that something you build to?
Not typically, no. Generally speaking, you don't start at pen testing or red team operations, you sort of end there. But something that I would recommend, if that's the goal, is to learn as much as you can about the operating system. I wouldn't take somebody who, for example, says, okay, I want to do a career change. I've been, doing this, and now I want to go into InfoSec. I wouldn't say, well, read Windows internals, because that is not exactly a page turner that people should do. I would start with sort of like basic figuring out how to processes work. What is a DLL, right? How does an application load code, right? The reason is, with rare exceptions, we're not really, in my field at least, we're not really using like hacking tools. What we're doing is we're leveraging normal day-to-day applications and we're making them do malicious things. So if I'm in your environment, I don't want to necessarily bring in a bunch of really cool tools that you might see on YouTube. Rather, I want to hide in plain sight. And the best way to do that is to learn what the operating system can do, the tools that the sys administrators are using. That way, when they're looking through their logs, they don't see like malicious virus this or blah, blah, blah. They're saying, oh, well, this looks like a normal program. I guess this is normal traffic. So, and I realize that's like a high level answer. So to bring that back to a more simplistic way of looking at it is, learn how the computer works. You know, what happens when you, what happens, for example, when you open your browser and you connect to a web page? What are the nuances, right? What is a server? How does it connect? What are cookies or sessions? Things like that. If you learn how the system works and you sort of get a really good general sense of what's happening on your computer behind the scenes, then you can start looking at, how do I break these things? Or how do I leverage these things to do something else, gain access to something that I'm not supposed to? Right? Before you learn to pick a lock, you have to learn how a lock works. So that's sort of the mindset and the approach that I would take for people. And there's plenty of things you can do online to start doing that. So that's definitely the recommendation, which is to be to understand the basics and then build on top of that. Also, I highly recommend that people work at a SOC or just learn how defense works. It's super beneficial to know how people are hunting you if your goal is to be covert in the end. So yeah, those would be, I think, my biggest recommendations. Oh, and to not give up. You know, it's not fun at first. It's kind of boring, you know, when you're learning all the basic stuff. You know, it's, if you I talk to a lot of people write me all the time because of that video that I made that went viral, and they say, okay, teach me to be a hacker. And it's like, you don't walk into a dojo and say, I want to be a black belt. You have to build to that, right? And so I think patience and persistence. But this isn't something that belongs to a few individuals. I believe anyone can do this. You just have to stick through it. You have to outlast the people who are unwilling to put in the time and the hours that it takes. Yeah, so persistence also very important.
That is wonderful. I think that's probably the best tool that anyone has in their toolbox, is that persistence. And I appreciate your honesty that some of that beginning stuff is a little boring, quite honestly, when you're working on some of those operating systems or working on Linux command line and ready to throw your computer potentially. Those are natural and normal feelings. So I know that we are in various stages, according to with all of our panelists here, of your career. And so I'd love to know a little bit about in your career, if you're just at the beginning phase, where you want to go, or if you're more in an advanced stage, which I know we have a couple of people here, where do you see yourself going? Based on this panel, you all have a lot of similarities across lots of different specialties in cybersecurity, and it seems like there's a lot of collaboration. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that and where you think you might go. Where do you take your career? Where do you go from where you are now?
Okay, I'll start. So where I would like to eventually go is into digital forensics and incident response. So right now with the phishing simulated phishing program, we work with our incident response team because some of these phishes are real, and so they have to understand how to respond. So, like I said, like being in this position, it is a great starting place to help me branch out. So I'm in great communications with them to understand, okay, all right, so this is the cert that I have, and this is what I want to learn, and this is where I want to go. They're like, okay, well, we can start navigating you in that direction, because if you don't know where you want to go, you're never going to get there, right? So we're trying to set out clear steps for me, because I've only been doing this, it's only been like 2 months. So I have imposter syndrome, got it, deal with it all the time. But my team, my boss, super supportive. My boss, when I'll go back to the imposter syndrome, when she got into her position, she didn't know anything about cybersecurity either. So I looked to her as like, you know what, in about 7 years, that could be me, because she speaks so well on the subject. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, of course you don't. You're only 2 months in. But if you know where you want to go, we can help you get there and learn the things you need to know in order to progress in your career. So I have an awesome, my boss, my team, my colleagues on the incident response team, they're all trying to lead me in that direction. And they're not offended that I want to leave, you know, the phishing program to go do that.
That is phenomenal. And I have a great follow-up question for you and for the rest of the panelists, but I want to hear a little bit more about their answers to this question. So Wendy, where do you see yourself moving next after you have some time, and why do you want to move in that direction?
Well, I'm still, you know, adjusting to my current position. I've already moved a little bit. I started working at Secular Solutions in October. So it's been less than a year still, and I'm already in my second role. So I'm still trying to figure things out. I'm still growing in my current position, but because we are a smaller company, I can, try to get more involved in the incident response that our company does, in the, a bit of the threat hunting, SOC 3 type role. So I'm just trying to learn as much as I can in my current role right now and just get a feel for things still.
Great. Can you explain what threat hunting is for individuals that may not be aware of what that is in cybersecurity?
Sure. So doing research on indicators of compromise for systems, trying to find out about threats that are out there, information that we don't currently have, digging deeper to look for new new issues that are taking advantage of vulnerabilities before the information's already out there, and a lot of digging deep to really gain whatever information we can about new threats.
You're getting that intel on the bad actors and the ways they could exploit you. I like that. Wonderful. Mansi, what would you have to say about where you are now and where you want to go?
Yeah, so I want to be in the C-level suite. That's the end goal. That was all. And how I'm getting there, because there isn't like a formula, unfortunately, to get there. SANS actually had this really cool CISO map. So like one of the first conferences, they had like a freebie version of it. So I downloaded it, and it shows you the different domains that are in cybersecurity and kind of trying to get experience in each of them. So I've come through from the GRC, from like governance and risk and compliance, and then also had a chance to lead operations for a small fintech startup type thing. And now I'm doing threat intelligence, so getting my feet there. But so I'm not sure what the next immediate thing would be, but definitely the final, if I could, would be that C-level suite title.
Great. And Jose, what would you say is your next step? I feel like everyone thinks of hacking, but where do you go from there when you're already in like the perfect role?
Well, like any other hacker, probably America's Next Top Model is the goal. Just from here, yeah. Well, I'm sort of already doing what I want to do for the rest of my life, which is kind of a weird thing to say out loud. The only way that I can keep going up is either I become, for example, like team lead, or if I were to open my own cybersecurity firm and then do that on my own. But I'm perfectly comfortable right now learning as much as I can. I really like being sort of lower on the totem pole on my team because I learn from everybody. But I'll probably do this for another 10 years before I can think of what the next bigger step would be. It's been a very long journey getting here, but yeah, I don't see me having huge changes in the next 5 to 10 years, just career-wise, unless of course I get picked.
America's Next Top Model, when they start casting, obviously that might change.
I invited them to this, so I'm hoping scouts, but no, I'm kidding, obviously.
We got to get another YouTube viral for you. So hopefully we can make that happen for you from this.
Can you imagine?
That would be wonderful. Well, I appreciate everything that everyone is saying today. I also would like to hear a little bit about what you looked for when you first started looking for your first role, or for what you look for in an employer. So we know that cybersecurity is a really diverse space with all sorts of different employers and all sorts of dynamics. So I imagine that some of the traditional things you look for in an employer are there, but also, are you just looking to get a foot in? What matters to you when you're trying to get into the field? What do you consider? I see a lot of thoughtful faces. Angie, I'm going to ask you to start.
Yeah, I'll go. So in the beginning, I was just hoping that anybody would take me, to be honest, just because, I had zero experience. So when it came to finding a place that would work for me, it's just letting them know, like, hey, you can look at my resume and tell I'm brand spanking new to this. Can you help? Are you willing to help me grow? Right? I can come with some soft skills, right? But do you have room to nurture and grow? Because some companies want you to hit the ground running. I'm crawling, and I don't even know if I'm crawling. Like, I'm still trying to lift my head up, right? Because I'm so new to the field. So that's what I was looking for. And I got rejected a lot in the beginning. And it was like, I had to take a break from applying to jobs because, you know, you get that dreaded email, thanks for applying, but, and I'm like, oh, another one, add that to the file. It's okay. Just, you have to be resilient. But the number one priority for me was finding a company that understood that I was new and would work with me.
Great. Wendy, did you have a similar experience? And when you were interviewing, how did you know that they would work with you? Did you ask about specific training? What are some questions you might ask of an employer?
So when I was applying for jobs, I don't think I really knew what I was looking for. I was just really eager to get my foot in the door. But I think working where I am now has taught me a lot about what is important to look for in a workplace and an employer. I am very fortunate that I have a very supportive workplace. If I have a question about anything, I could ask anyone in the company. Like, I could just, even if it's not their direct job, I could just stop anyone, ask them for a question. They would answer, explain to me. Everyone's really helpful and supportive, very willing to teach. And I think that's really important, to have a supportive environment where, you know, as everyone spoke about imposter syndrome. I have cheerleaders here, you know, helping me to work past that, reminding me that I have the skills and I'm able to do what I'm supposed to do. And it's really a great feeling. So I think it's really important to find a workplace that has those kind of values, that they value, you know, growth and teamwork, and they're supportive.
Great. And in the interview process, were there specific questions that you asked, or did you just trust your gut when it came to that?
Well, it was I wasn't so aware of what I needed to look for as I was interviewing. I was just hoping to get my first cybersecurity job. You know, I did, and it was tough to get interviews. You know, it was. It was a difficult process. There were a lot of rejections. It was a lot of no's before I even got an interview, and I did not have questions. But I think it is good. I think you can get a feel from interviewing how, like, the kind of workplace that it is. When I had my interview here, I didn't ask any specific questions, but I had a great feeling going out. I'm like, wow, that seems like a really great company to work for.
Great. Jose, would you echo that? Are there any specific questions that you had? Is there something that you look for specifically before you join an organization? Or do you just have a list of, like, these are the places I want to work for? How would you recommend?
Yeah, well, I'm not exactly a hot commodity is the issue. It's interesting to hear the similarities in all of our experiences. I also had a lot of no's before I got any yeses, particularly because, and I didn't mention this in my background, I don't have a high school diploma. So I don't, you know, I'm self-taught pretty much with everything that I do, coding and all of that. And then once I got the SANS courses, that the gate, I learned a lot, of course, but I also got finally like certificates that sort of helped the journey along. As far as job interviewing goes and asking questions, one of my favorite questions to ask whoever's interviewing me is, what is something that you know now that you wish you would have known before you took your position? Because that sort of brings out the whatever the minutia of whatever might be the negative side of that position. But more than anything, I enjoy doing work worth doing. So before I was at Zoom, I was in DC on a federal red team, and I was basically hacking into federal organizations. And that gave me a sense, or rather a semblance of like, hey, this is a good thing because this is my country and I want to make sure that it's secure. But I started working for Zoom right at the outset of the pandemic. And so it was really cool to work on a product that was keeping people together, right? So there were no real hesitations there for me. And it's been a wonderful experience. Everyone's amazing. It's a really good company to work for. So I only mention this because at the beginning of my career, I was working wherever they would let me work because I didn't have any qualifications or anything. So I was working for less money with less than ideal circumstances or environments. But as my career progressed and I got experience and I got the certificates, it got to the point where, hey, now I can pick where I work, and my situation, and in fact, my life literally changed. So that has been sort of my journey. I feel it's important to mention that because in the beginning, you are going to, I mean, with rare exception, for the most part, you're going to work some jobs that are not the best, but at least it's a foot in the door and you gain a lot by the experience.
Thank you. I love that you all are being so open and honest, and I really appreciate that. The no's more than yeses. I think that we all hear all the time about the cybersecurity skills gap, and there's this huge need for cybersecurity professionals, but it still is challenging, just like finding a job in any field. You're going to encounter some challenges, and that foot in the door is oftentimes just that first step is what you need. So I love hearing that. Mansi, do you have anything to add to this or to share?
Yeah, and I agree that the foot in the door is important, but especially when you're starting off and the imposter syndrome is already high and the anxiety is already high. I know that I did this. I feel like I can vouch for this, is that definitely look to the first employer, especially the first employer, values your soft skills and your personality more than they value your technical knowledge, right? So they value the fact that you're curious and wanting to learn more than the fact if you can do this command injection or do this or do that. Also because your flame is just starting at that time, right? And so before it has the chance to be resilient, right, and like kind of develop this outer level, you don't want someone to just pour water on it and be like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do it. So you see that, and from Women's Society of Cyber Justice, I can tell you there's a trend of, as much as there's like a need and stuff, there's a trend of women specifically leaving the industry, right? And so much of that is because the flame is just starting, and then like that's at least how I envision it. But that happens a lot, more so than that's actually talked about. So at least for your first few, if definitely not your first one, ensure that that's not going to happen, right? That will set you up on the right path for having a long sustaining career. And then moving forward after that, I know that every employer I looked after that, I definitely looked at their leadership to see what are the leadership, not just the core values, but then who the leaders are. I did my OSINT, not on just the hiring manager, but like the CISO, and like who are the other people, are they all very focused and rigid into, we just want to do it in a 2x2? That's something I want to avoid at all costs, right? I don't want someone to just tell me, you can just look at this part, like, because cybersecurity, you need to have that bigger view to kind of understand how the different components are working, no matter which domain you're in. So yeah, but I second and ditto and copy paste.
I love the idea of the flame needing to be fed. And as Jose mentioned, those first few jobs that you may have, he really put in pages dues, for lack of a better term. And I think that everyone has had to do that in some form or another, which is why organizations like the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, I think there's also a program called VetSec, which is for veterans in cybersecurity. I'd love to hear from any of you if there's some other organizations, thanks Jose for vouching for them, that you would recommend. So maybe if that first employer is not everything that you wanted to be, or you got that first job and now you're going, okay, now what next? What are some resources that you would recommend for those that are viewing? Obviously, WSC is phenomenal because they are hosting this today and helping provide the training opportunities, but we want to be able to highlight some others that you might recommend or some resources to look to. I personally would say LinkedIn, get out there and just start talking to people and connecting with individuals. So if you're interested in a field, you just go out and you talk to them. I myself have benefited so much from listening to others in the field and getting to talk to so many of you who've been so insightful and shared your experiences. So I'm gonna stop talking and let y'all.
Yeah, actually SANS themselves are now hosting these free summits. Like I know the New to Cyber Summit just recently happened, and threat intelligence is coming somewhere in October. So I already have that in my calendar. So those are free, and it's a great way to meet people. And then after that, if you do the LinkedIn connection, then at least it's not like a cold call and you'd be like, oh, should I send this? Should I not? Be like, oh, we had that, or I heard you speak. And it provides for a good intro on that level. So, but relying on the community is huge.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to LinkedIn. Actually, that's how I got this job. I got this job in a freak way. So there was another Slack for Blacks in cybersecurity. Somebody posted the job. I applied. A week later, I saw it on LinkedIn. And then the person in the current position said, oh, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Well, I reached out. And so from there, like, you can't be afraid to like ask questions, or if you want it, you have to go after it and get it. Granted, you can't, there, you know, on LinkedIn, some people will, you know, they'll connect with you and immediately they're trying to sell you something. It's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be natural, right? LinkedIn, huge resources. So I always mess this up. ICMCP, right? They have their organization, and there's just so many various Slack channels that I didn't even know existed. I went down a rabbit hole, especially for like digital forensics. I found somebody via Twitter, and then I clicked on their page and they referenced all these sources, and you start joining those groups and start asking questions. And by asking questions and being, you know, active, you'll start making connections and people will know who you are, but doing it in a natural way, nothing that's forced, because if it's forced, people are just going to shut you out.
Great. I also know, thanks Mansi for mentioning that SANS Summit. I absolutely recommend those. I would also recommend maybe some BSides. Have any of you attended a BSides event or done anything with any of those? Okay, I have two people shaking their heads, so I'd love if you could share about your experience with some of those community events.
Yeah,
please. No, I insist. I'm muting already.
Sorry, Jose. So I helped create BSides in San Diego, BSides SF. It's great to volunteer, and that's the best part. You don't need any kind of prior experience to volunteer, my favorite job is to do either like a speaker wrangler or registration, because you're bound to meet all sorts of people. And like, that's when you're trying to improve your network or get to know people, that's the best way. They're very low key. There's not like, you don't have to, you know, formal attire or anything like that. And yet they have enough of hands-on in most of these conferences, BSides specifically, where there's either like lock picking or something that we can actually try things out, you know? So it's not just vendor pitches and it's not just listening to people talk, but then you get to test out your own skill sets too for a bit. CTFs are always a thing too.
Jose, would you echo that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the cons. I've spoken at NorCon, which was a lot of fun, but also just attending, like Mansi had said, there's the villages, which, you know, they have the hands-on labs and things like that. Also, you have a ton of swag, stickers. If your laptop's not covered in stickers, are you even really a hacker? So, but it's the networking, and there's a lot of, you know, before I joined the industry professionally, I had this idea, because of the internet, that everyone was kind of a jerk, that everyone was calling, you know, each other skids or putting each other down, or, you know, saying you didn't have the skills. When I joined the industry professionally, I found that the opposite is true. Everyone's encouraging everybody. Everyone's willing to share source code and technique. And they sort of want to, because they all have the same goal, which is to make the world a better place. And so it's like this sort of team mentality. At least that's been my experience, right? I don't want to speak for everyone, but it's a great place to network, and you meet a lot of people that are willing to stay in touch. You know, you can get some mentors. You can even help some people that want to do or learn more things, because no one of us is better than all of us. So it does turn into this really cool sort of tribe, which I've heard that word used here a lot. I definitely recommend going no matter what level you're at, because you're going to learn a lot and you're going to meet a lot of really interesting people. You're mute. Yeah.
It's bound to happen eventually. Thank you all so much for participating today and sharing. What I love the most about hearing each of you speak and share today was that despite working in different areas, you all had so many commonalities, which I think is absolutely wonderful for everyone attending today to hear. And I hope that they can join us in the breakout room following this session. We'll also have an additional speaker, Shinesa, who could not join us, who works in cloud security and will be able to field any specific questions related to that. So thank you all so much for joining me today. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. And I look forward to seeing some future CISOs and just really awesome technical leads in the future. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen, for hosting.
Yeah, thanks for having us.